How's it going, Twitch? My name is Skull, and on behalf of East Asia Soft, welcome to today's stream. Today is Sunday, which means that it's time for me to continue my playthrough of Venus Improbable Dream, a very short but very beautiful visual novel. Let me make sure I got my cheat sheet brought up here so I can guarantee I get the good ending. Very important that I get the good ending. Okay. We had just went to see a concert, a classical music concert with Haruka, so let's see what happens next. We're on the drive back. Thanks to my deep thoughts, I'd been somewhat distracted as the lights had come back up, and we'd left the theater behind to head back into the real world. It had been a bit of a blur, and I've only just started to pay full attention to my surroundings again. Haruka's dad drives us through the city streets, having generously offered to drop me off at my house, as Haruka had suggested that he would. Naturally, the conversation hasn't yet moved on from the performance. "So, did you enjoy it, Kakeru?" She asks me while shooting me a brief glimpse in the rearview mirror, and I nod enthusiastically. "Yeah, it was great." I'm not just trying to seem grateful either. It really had been a fun experience. My favorite was Moonlight Sonata. The way the pianist had commanded his instrument will probably be ingrained into my mind for days. I'm not surprised. That man on the piano was brilliant. Her husband's eyes also flick to me in the mirror, and he wears a silly grin. "That'll be you one day, Kakeru." Even I snort at that one. The idea of me ever becoming even half as good as that guy doesn't enter into the realm of possibility. Not even the idea of me being on stage seems likely, although the feelings I've been having since the show ended keep bringing my focus back to it. When the chatter dies down and everyone becomes content to gaze out the windows, I murmur quietly to Haruka, "Do you think we can do it then?" She looks towards me inquisitively. "Perform on stage?" "Yeah." She leans back in her seat for a moment, her eyes drifting back to the window as she contemplates my question. She stays silent for a while, and it almost makes me think that it had been a bad idea to ask. I guess it's the same question she's been weighing up for years now about herself, having failed to meet her own expectations every time. However, she eventually speaks up. "I don't know, Kakeru, but I'd really like to hope so." Her voice carries a certain measure of sorrow, as though she's fighting back some pessimism, and I can understand why. The same thing has happened to her over and over for a long time, so it must be hard to picture being able to break the habit. On top of that, I can empathize with her fear since I'm feeling exactly the same thing. It seems like an impossible task, and yet after tonight, I think I'm starting to share another feeling with Haruka. The bittersweet wish to do that which seems unachievable. "I knew ever since I picked up the flute that I wanted to perform for people. I suppose I've just got to keep holding on to that." "Yeah." She grows quiet, and the atmosphere around us becomes somewhat heavy in a way that's hard to describe. We do nothing but think as the lights and buildings rush by around us, the same thoughts circling in our minds. "What about you, Kakeru?" Her soft tones barely break the film of my concentration. "Huh?" "How are you feeling about this?" It's a complicated question. Of course, I want to be able to just exude confidence and say something like, "I'm feeling great, Haruka. Of course we can do it." But unfortunately, it's just not that simple, and I know that she's aware of it. Searching my own spinning thoughts, I still feel very uncertain about almost everything, but one thing that remains constant is that I'm still willing to keep going, for now. Knowing how much it means to Haruka and having had something of an awakening just now in the theater, I can empathize with her sincere wish to perform. The truth is that I do genuinely want to try to do this, for both her sake and mine. I feel like we should keep trying as hard as we can. A smile slowly spreads across Haruka's face at my words, and after a quiet moment, she nods. Yeah, you're right. We're working together now. And now that we have Venus, I feel like I want to do it even more than ever. She grows silent once more, an array of different emotions swimming in her expression, and I start to feel as though my own face must be looking a similar way. After a little while, she turns her head towards me again, a dreamy look in her eyes. I think if we manage to do this, even if it's the only piece I will ever play on a stage in my life, then I'll be happy. With those words echoing in my mind, I feel myself starting to fully accept the responsibility that I've taken on by agreeing to be a part of her dream, and pray internally that somehow we'll be able to make it happen. I sit back in my chair and watch as Matsumoto-sensei strides between the desks in a businesslike manner. Speculating, I catch glimpses of people's faces as he returns their test papers to them, their expressions either brightening or growing anguished at their results. After dealing with the student in front of me, he approaches my desk, eyeing my paper for a moment before handing it to me with a slightly surprised look. I'll see you after class, Akane. He mutters the words under his breath quietly so as to not let the whole room know, and then moves on to the next person wordlessly. Taken aback and somewhat confused, I examine the result written at the top of my paper. Well, it's not terrible, but it is a little low in comparison to how I usually do with these things. I don't remember having messed too much of it up, but I obviously slipped somewhere. Personally, I'm not too worried about it, as I probably just zoned out a little when I did this. I'm pretty sure I'll be able to pull it back easily. It's Matsumoto-sensei that I'm concerned about. I really hope he doesn't totally lay into me about it. Trying to squash the sense of foreboding that's growing inside me, I turn my attention back to the front of the class where Matsumoto-sensei is now standing, having finished doling out the papers. He gives us another one of his little lectures on diligence and hard work, and then the bell finally rings. As much as I want to dash out of the room like I usually do, I resign myself to the fact that I've got to stay here for now and endure whatever grilling I might be about to get. Matsumoto-sensei looks up at me as soon as I arrive at his desk, his eyebrows raising again, and he abandons the look he's writing in to give me his full attention. Akane, your test results were a little lower than usual, which surprises me. I consider you one of the most consistent students in this class ordinarily, but this is a little disappointing. He reaches across to me and takes my paper from my hands, leafing through my answers. Were you having problems with the material? I wouldn't assume that this is beyond your comfort level. And if I remember correctly, you scored much more highly on the last test of this nature. Is there an issue that needs to be resolved here? His voice is calm, but thanks to his perpetual stern expression, it automatically feels like I'm in deep trouble. The entire class is used to his demeanor by now, but he's still capable of sending a chill down the spine of anyone who teeters on the edge of falling into his bad books. Ignoring the childish nerves that spring up in reaction to his questioning, I shake my head. No. He regards me somewhat suspiciously, his already crinkled brow furrowing further. Well, you're certainly not the type of student I'd describe as lazy, and I wouldn't expect you to be playing the fool and neglecting your studies either. There must be a reason. He states this very matter-of-factly, gazing steadily at me with an expression that suggests I'd better come out with the truth. The odd thing is, I don't really know why I scored low on this test. I don't think I've been acting any differently in class, and I've kept up with my homework. Although, well, I guess there is one thing. I probably haven't realized it until now, but my head's been so full of festival preparations over the last week that it's definitely taken up a lot of my concentration. On top of that, I seem to remember that we did this test just after I'd agreed to perform with Haruka, so I think my nerves had been worse at the time. That's what must have done it. I must have spaced out. I've been really busy with festival preparations. I'd planned to elaborate more than that, but my tongue gets caught up amid my uncertainty of how to word it so that I don't sound like a bad student. However, before I can continue, he tilts his head slightly, seeming a little bemused. Festival preparations? Are you participating? Sorry. He seems pretty surprised, and in a way, I can't blame him. Yeah, with the music club. His eyes scan my face with a sense of disbelief, and I feel myself start to turn uncomfortably red under his scrutiny. You'll be performing then? That's the aim. Yeah. He seems to short circuit for a moment, processing what I've said, and then to my shock, his whole demeanor changes. Well, that's very encouraging to hear, Akane. I wasn't aware that you'd gotten involved with the club to such an extent. Caught off guard by his sudden approving response, I have a little mind blink of my own, astounded that, apparently, I'm no longer being gently reprimanded. Seeming pleased by my explanation, he continues. I wouldn't have predicted that you'd go that far with it. This is very positive news. I'm glad to know that your extracurricular activities are allowing you to branch out and become more confident. Well, I'm not sure about that, but if he wants to see it that way, then sure. Still reeling slightly from the fact that I appear to be off the hook, I nod at his words. Yes, very good. I should impress upon you the importance of keeping your obligations balanced, though. I'm aware that you're a generally diligent student, and that this is most likely a one-off occurrence, but please be sure to maintain your standards when it comes to schoolwork. I have a feeling that you'll do just fine on the next test, but do ensure that a result this low doesn't happen again. Yes? Ah, there it is. The reprimand. Although it's pretty light by Matsumoto-sensei's standards. Not wanting to waste such a precious reprieve, I nod eagerly, and he straightens up, seeming satisfied. Alright, Akane, we'll leave it at that. If you get your head down and resume your usual performance in class, then I'll be happy to pretend that this never happened. He holds up my paper, which is still in his hand, wafting it in the air while shooting me an expression that suggests he's doing me a favor. Fully aware of it, I nod again, silently thanking whatever deity has bestowed this rarity upon me. Alright then. We'll say no more about it. Off you go. He discards the paper onto his desk, shooting me a look of cool understanding, and seizing the moment, I bow slightly in thanks and make my way towards the door, free to go to lunch at last. Who knew that the music club could make me look good in Matsumoto-sensei's eyes? I guess my friendship with Haruka isn't the only thing I've gained from it. After an uneventful afternoon, during which I continued to marvel at Matsumoto-sensei's lenience, I'd met up with Haruka for our practice. Considering that the noise level in the other room has raised noticeably, turning from organized practicing to a cacophonous mess, free practice must have started for the group. Luckily, it's free practice all the time for me and Haruka, which is a definite bonus. I consult my sheet music as Haruka points out some important information, nodding to myself as she speaks. So, the start of that phrase is a little later than you had it before. The last note falls at the beginning of the next bar, when the bigger chord comes in with the right hand, so you can play them at the same time. Does that make sense? Yeah, sorry, I don't know why I came in early.
That's alright. Do you want to try that section again?
Sure. We agree on the start point and then play through the piece up to the point we've been talking about. This time I get my part right, and it sounds much better than it had before. Haruka stops playing, nodding with satisfaction, and I lift my hands from the keys.
See how that was better?
Yeah, thanks for pointing it out. Glad that another tiny increment of progress has been made, we discuss what to focus on next. However, before we can get very far, the two of us are startled by a sudden, unexpected knock on the door. Haruka stiffens slightly at the sound, and we both fall silent as the door swings open to reveal Kudo-sensei. Hello, you two! I'm just here to catch up with you on how things are going. Ah, so today is the day of our check-in. I feel as though I would have appreciated a warning, but at the same time, I know what Kudo-sensei's like. He often gets so engrossed in what he's doing when it comes to music that other things tend to slip his mind. Haruka looks towards me, a mixture of awkwardness and slight irritation on her face, as though she's rolled her eyes if she knew what he couldn't see that. But as though she would roll her eyes if she knew that he wouldn't see it. Considering that the only real interaction that she ever has with Kudo-sensei is in the context of him repeatedly probing her for progress updates in the run-up to the festival each year, I can see why she might feel as though he's pestering her. I feel like he's a pretty good advisor, relaxed and considerate, but to her, he might be a bit of an annoyance. Luckily, he doesn't seem to pick up on it like I do, and simply leans casually against the now closed door behind him, gazing at us both as nonchalantly as always. Firstly, I was wondering how much of the piece you're going to play, as it's quite long for a festival performance. We do tend to try to stick to 5 minutes or under if we can. Thankfully, Haruka had already thought of that, and suggested that we chop the 8.5-minute full version down to a more precise length. Stealing a quick glance at her, I see that she's still a little off-kilter thanks to his abrupt arrival, so I answer for the both of us. We're doing 3.5 minutes, from the start through to bar 60. He opens his own copy of the piece's sheet music, which he brought with him, apparently from his own personal collection, and turns to the point I'd mentioned, noting the cutoff point and nodding with intrigue. That's quite a good place to finish, actually. I do like an unresolved ending sometimes. So, how have you arranged this for piano and flute? I'm interested to see how you've handled it. I feel as though I'm not entirely qualified to answer him, knowing what we've done, but not exactly why some of it is the best choice. However, Haruka perks up at last, sensing that this is her area of expertise, and puts her disdain on Kudo-sensei aside to speak up. The both of us explain our decisions, though Haruka takes the lead on a lot of it, and he nods along, seeming to be generally satisfied with how we've adapted the piece to our capabilities. When we run out of things to say, he closes his book with a pleased expression. Well, I think that sounds pretty good. Would you mind if I heard a little? You don't have to play the whole thing if you don't want. I know that it's still relatively early days, considering you only started working on it properly last week. Both Haruka and I clench our fists simultaneously, not exactly comfortable with unveiling our progress so soon. We've been improving steadily, but it's still not really in a presentable state yet, so I feel as though it's going to sound sloppy. However, Haruka reluctantly picks up her flute, turning her sheet music back to the first page, and I follow her lead, sitting back at the piano and doing the same. She seems quite wooden and not very happy about the idea of playing for him, but she counts me in regardless. We play him a tentative, abbreviated version of the piece, stopping when we feel less sure of what we're doing, and Haruka's shoulders sag in relief when it's over. Kudo-sensei contemplates us for a moment, and then hums with uncertainty. It's not bad, but it definitely needs a lot of work to get to a good standard. I suppose you're still a little unsure of yourselves, but I'd recommend that you really dedicate yourselves to your practicing. He's right, of course, but it doesn't feel great to be told that your performance is subpar, even if in a tactile way. That's the main reason that Haruka and I hadn't wanted him to just barge in randomly like this and catch us so unprepared. It would have been much better if he'd done it next week, as we would have had a few more days to solidify our playing more. I nod meekly, but Haruka seems to stew silently across from me, and after collecting herself for a moment, she pipes up.
It's going to sound much better than that. We haven't finished working through our parts properly yet, but when we do, it'll be much more fluent and emotive. We'll do a good job of it.
After this timid defense of our start, she falls silent, seeming embarrassed at her slight outburst, though she hadn't exactly shouted or anything. In a way, I'm quite surprised that she spoke up like that, but I guess she's taken his critique more personally than I had. He raises his eyebrows in surprise, though doesn't seem offended or annoyed, and fixes his usual smile back in place. All right, I'll take your word for it then. You do seem like you know what you're doing, so I won't question your ideas. I'll check in again with you closer to the festival, okay? I nod in agreement, and a beat later, Haruka does the same, still looking flustered. Okay, keep up the good work. He opens the door, exiting through it without saying anything more, and once it's closed behind him, Haruka lets out a loud huff. Are you okay? She relaxes properly, resting her flute on top of its case, and nods, still bashful.
Yeah, I didn't mean to sound that defensive.
She frowns in a deflated manner, and hoping to cheer her up, I try to inject some humor into the situation. Well, you definitely told him. I don't think he's going to try and poke holes in our performance anymore. To my relief, she picks up on my amused tone of voice and exhales a laugh of her own, letting go of her embarrassment.
I hope not. I just kind of felt a bit... Well, I guess I just didn't like hearing him suggest that Venus was a bad idea.
I can understand that. The piece is so precious to her that it probably felt like a bit of an attack when he'd expressed uncertainty at our progress with it so far. Makes sense. Don't feel bad about it. She nods, though remains a little pensive, and I rack my brain to try to come up with something that'll help her feel better. In the end, I realize that the best thing I can do is to keep our motivation as high as possible, as she's been doing this whole time. I guess it just means that we have to work super hard and prove him wrong, right? At this, she seems to brighten, contemplating my words for a moment before smiling.
Yeah, you're right. We'll show him. We'll show everyone.
Glad to see her more like herself again, I take her words to heart. Yeah, and anyway, Kudo-sensei might not be a fan of what we've decided to do, but I reckon my teacher is. He asked to talk to me at the start of lunch about a crappy test result, but when I said I'd been distracted with working on Venus, he totally forgave me. She regards me with both surprise and a little alarm.
Wait, you got in trouble for low grades? I didn't want to ruin your school record on my account.
She seems suddenly apologetic, as if cursing herself for piling a large workload onto me.
Is it too much? We could do something else, or I'll do it alone.
For some reason, her unnecessary panic tickles me, and I accidentally end up letting out a bark of a laugh, which only seems to startle her further. Don't be silly, it's fine. She struggles with herself, seeming to realize that she's being a little foolish, but her worry remains on her face.
But what if your teacher gets really annoyed? I don't want to be the reason you get bad grades, or have to repeat a year.
I go to cut off her words, but instead more laughter comes out. I don't know why this is so funny to me, although it's probably partly because Haruka should know I've already committed to performing with her. Suggesting that I abandon her now to keep up a straight-laced appearance is a little ridiculous in my mind. Good evening, Dorian. How are you doing? I'm not going to get into that much trouble. If she'd seen Matsumoto-sensei's oddly pleased reaction to my festival-related news, then she'd be certain of it. Apparently, coming to the realization that she's worrying far too much, she drops her tense posture and gives in to sheepishness. Muttering quietly, she shoots me one last sentence on the matter, although I can tell from her voice that she's also attempting to hide some of her own amusement.
You're mean, Kakaru.
The remark only makes me chuckle more, and a few seconds later, she succumbs to the daft nature of the situation and joins in. The voice acting is a lot of fun. That's why I do this. I'm glad you're doing good. It's Friday. Friday! Friday! Here comes the weekend. Glory, hallelujah. At least I get one last club session with Haruka before the weekend is truly upon us. Copying down the paragraph that Matsumoto-sensei has written on the board, I'm in the middle of attempting to be somewhat diligent when I'm startled out of my concentration. I genuinely got a text right there. That was a text in the game that was just for fun, but I actually did get a text at that. That was funny. Okay. My phone suddenly vibrates in my pocket. Thank God it wasn't so loud. After glancing around sheepishly to make sure that no one noticed me jump in my seat, I fished my phone out, checking it stealthily under the desk, as we all did in grade school. I'd expected it to be Haruka, considering that she's pretty much the only person who ever texts me, but then I realized that that's not possible right now. We're still in class, and not only does she never text me at a time like this, but she also uses dictation to compose the messages, and she can't just whip out her phone and start talking to it in front of her teacher. The notion makes me have to stifle a giggle. Opening the notification, I see that instead of Haruka, the 4 boys from music club are chatting in our group conversation, evidently ignoring their own teachers to send sneaky messages. The sight of the sudden flurry of activity surprises me. They haven't talked a whole lot in this group since they added me to it, only sending the odd casual question about club pieces. I get the feeling that, since I'm not really part of the friendship group, they haven't wanted to partake in too much of their usual banter. They probably made a separate group without me for that. However, on this occasion, I noticed that I've been tagged in a couple of messages, so I survey the room to make sure that Matsumoto-sensei isn't about to catch me in the act before scrolling back to see what I missed. Unusual. Instead of just waiting to talk to us all during our club session, 2 of the guys are asking us all to meet outside the cafeteria once this class ends, including me. It seems like they want to organize something, though they haven't mentioned what it is yet. This is definitely irregular, and as soon as my brain processes the word cafeteria, my stomach clenches nervously. I don't go to the cafeteria. It's about as far away from my normal routine as you can get. However, the messages do say to meet outside of it, not in it, so maybe they don't actually want to hang out in there. It could be just a brief chat outside and then back to our usual lunchtime activities. I'm not sure what to think or how to respond, as I have no idea what this meeting is about. I glance up at Matsumoto-sensei to maintain the pretense that I'm paying attention, my thumb hovering over the text bar hesitantly. What should I say? After deliberating for a moment, I ask an awkward question, my icon looking out of place in the middle of everybody else's as my message joins the chat. What are you organizing? It takes just under a minute for someone to reply, but when they do, I'm stricken with an almost instant sense of trepidation. Another class meetup, so we can all hang out. You coming? This again. As I reread the words several times, I feel my body tense up in fear of something that hasn't even happened yet. I'm surprised that they're still considering me in their social plans, since I didn't even manage to show up last time. They probably think that it'll help me feel more comfortable in the club, but to be honest, I think the time for that has passed. Now that I don't play a role in the main group anymore, being able to relax around the others isn't really relevant. I could still try to branch out and meet new people anyway, but I'm not really sure what I want to, at least not right now. It's an appealing idea, but I just don't think I'm the kind of person who suits having a bunch of friends after all. As I steal clandestine glances Wow. Clandestine glances down at my phone in between false displays of innocence to Matsumoto-sensei. I struggle with how to reply. However, running the thoughts I've just had through my mind once more, I realize that I've already answered my own conundrum. I think I'd prefer to just stick with Haruka. Our mutual understanding of our flaws, as well as the quiet, pressure-free nature of our hangouts, is quite valuable to me, and I don't really feel like adding anything new or unfamiliar to the mix. With the guys, I have no idea what will happen, and that uncertainty is too jarring for me to deal with. On top of that, my panic attack from last time I had attempted to meet up rises unpleasantly in my memory, reminding me of the terror I'd felt. There's none of that with Haruka. Instead, I guess I feel safe. I don't worry that she'll ever do something to hurt my feelings or judge me for any fears that I have or mistakes that I make. She's someone I can actually let my guard down around. And that's it. That's all I need right now. Consulting the group chat again, I regretfully concoct what is probably an awfully worded message and hit send, biting my lip. Fujiwara and I are working really hard on our festival piece right now, so I want to focus on that. Sorry to let you down. Sitting there in mild agony, waiting for someone to reply, I fret over it for a few minutes. But when a couple of the boys text back, their responses put me ever so slightly at ease. That's okay, we should probably be doing the same. Yeah, don't worry about it. You can always join us during summer break. Well, at least they don't seem too annoyed. I'm not sure that I'll ever manage to accept any of their invitations and actually show up, so I don't ever make any promises about future meetups. My part in the conversation over, I slip my phone back into my pocket, although I still feel bad about turning them down. In a way, I'm not entirely sure that I made the right decision by closing myself off to other opportunities for friendship. It's counterproductive of me, really. But then, I have still made some progress by making friends with Haruka, so is it that bad? Unsure of myself, I push my attention back onto Matsumoto-sensei at last, aware that it's probably not a good idea to dwell on it too much. Besides, I'd better get my work done if I'm going to avoid any more low grades. After settling down and contemplating my class assignment, lunchtime had finally arrived. Haruka and I had agreed to spend lunch together this morning, and I head up to the stairwell on her floor. She appears after a few moments, and I call out to her gently.
Hey, Kakaru. Ready to go?
Yeah. Wasting no time, we head down the corridor and around the corner to Haruka's usual lunch spot this time. Once we're settled into our seats, we eat our meals with scattered conversation, though my mind won't fully rest. I'm still feeling slightly guilty about saying no to the boys, and as I look across at Haruka, I wonder if she'd say that I'd done the right thing. Feeling awkward, I swallowed my mouthful of food and bring it up. You know, I actually got asked to go to the cafeteria by those guys earlier. She raises her eyes to look towards me curiously.
The same ones who invited you to the coffee shop?
Yeah, they were trying to organize another meetup, but I kinda said no. My conscience prickles again, and I stuff a bite of pickled plum into my mouth to try and distract myself from it. Haruka seems to muse over the information for a moment before cocking her head to the side.
I probably would have done the same if I was you. I wouldn't want a repeat of last time.
I'm glad that she understands that, but the panic attack wasn't the entirety of my reason for turning them down. Unsure of how to word what I want to say or what to say at all, I hesitate before speaking up again. I guess I like hanging out with you like this. I wouldn't feel right doing it with them. Realizing the extent of how comfortable I've evidently grown around her, I raise my eyebrows at the revelation and glance up at Haruka. She's contemplating me somewhat bashfully, a tinge of pink coloring her cheeks.
Ah, well, that's nice of you to say, Kakaru. I wouldn't mind if you met up with other people every now and then, though.
I'd rather stay with you. The words had come out automatically, but now that I've said them, I feel as though they sound way mushier than I'd intended. As if to prove my point, the blush in Haruka's cheeks deepens and we both stiffen awkwardly, unsure of what to say now.
Well, I'm glad.
Festering in my embarrassment, I try to summon an adequate response, but don't quite get there. She raises a hand to her face as though checking how obviously flustered she is, and then lowers it with a timid smile.
It's nice that we started doing this. This is going to sound...
She trails off, evidently trying not to come across as cheeky as I had, although it seems as though she might not be able to avoid it.
I just like that this is our routine now, you know? I'm glad that we became friends. That's all.
She lowers her face to stare into her lunch shyly. And though I'm also reeling from how awkward this conversation is, I'm also quite appreciative of what she said. I'm truly grateful that we managed to strike up this unlikely friendship too, and it's nice to hear that she's just as happy about it. Also, it takes me a moment to realize that the issue of the club boys has totally fallen out of my head, preoccupied with the thought of the two of us instead. It fills me with a little more reassurance that I must have chosen wisely after all. This is just right for me and Haruka. I'd be a fool to start pushing her aside, even if only slightly, to try to cultivate some half-baked friendships with other people who don't get me anywhere near as well as she does. Exhaling with relief, I regard her still flushed cheeks with amusement. Me too. She giggles softly and then begins to eat again, so I follow suit, the atmosphere slowly going back to normal. Nothing but the sound of our chopsticks against our lunchboxes interrupts the silence for a minute or so. But then I notice that her expression grows a little concerned, something evidently on her mind. I'm about to ask if everything's okay, but she raises her worries herself.
I've been thinking about something since yesterday. Do you...
She seems to freeze in place for a second, not out of nerves, but with a vague dejection, and I wait for her to continue.
You don't think Kudo-sensei was right, do you?
I guess the awkward meeting we'd had with him yesterday is still playing on her mind. About what? Her brow furrows at her uncertainty, as her uncertainty seems to increase by the second. What's with the ogre? Oh, it's a laugh cry. Got it.
About Venus. It's not a bad choice, is it?
I'm instantly taken aback that she's questioning such a thing. Maybe his words had gotten lodged in her head to the point where she's now apprehensive of her own logic. She looks towards me with almost sad eyes, as if she's starting to think that we've genuinely made a mistake in choosing something that we aren't that well versed in yet, and that isn't as exciting as what other people would pick. I falter for a moment, wanting to console her, but also not wanting to lie to her. Considering it seriously, I do see Kudo-sensei's point, but at the same time... No, there's no way we could ever choose anything else, right? Haruka wants to play what's closest to her heart, and we can't get any closer than that. It's a great choice, Haruka. I don't think it matters what Kudo-sensei how he sees it. It's the piece that you love more than anything, and it's gotta be the right one, hasn't it? When I finish my little speech, I'm slightly astonished at my old boldness. But I'd meant what I said. When you really like something, you're automatically going to be more successful with it just because of your love for it. I've learnt this through watching Haruka continue to improve as a flutist since we started practicing Venus together properly. She puts her feelings into her playing somehow, something that can only really happen when you genuinely feel those emotions, rather than just trying to fake it. I can sound alright when I get to know a piece, but she takes it to another level. I gaze at her as she considers my words, and at first, I can't really figure out her expression. However, after a moment of silence, she looks up at me with a small smile, the doubt clearing from her face.
I do know that. You're absolutely right. I'm sorry. I don't know why I started thinking otherwise.
I shake my head almost to myself, in need of no apology. I'm just glad that she's not conflicted about it anymore. It's fine. We shouldn't let him pull us off. We know what we want to do. She visibly brightens, nodding in agreement.
Yeah, we already decided it, and I was so excited about it when we started. I still am.
Then it's for the best that we stick to it, right? She emits a soft laugh that sounds a bit like a sigh, nodding again with a more contented expression.
Definitely. Thanks, Kakaru. I don't know what came over me for a second.
Don't mention it. We share a moment of our wordless comfort, glad that her worries have passed, and then go back to our food. Contemplating what I'd said once more, I note that I really wasn't supporting her decision because it's what she'd want to hear. I do believe in her vision. And though nothing is guaranteed and our margin of success in the end is probably very slim, I still want to aid her as much as I can. We're in this together, and though I'd never put myself in this situation before, I don't really want to back down now. I guess I'd better just keep my head in the game and hope that the both of us draw some newfound courage from somewhere. A new week has begun, and with it comes an added sense of trepidation now that the festival is next week. Thankfully, I'm on my way to today's club session now. I can do my best and just lose myself in the work we're putting in and hopefully detach from my fears a little. Besides, Haruka has been more laser focused than I've ever known her to be in these past 2 weeks, which helps me to concentrate a bit better, so I'm looking forward to that. Reaching the door to the club room, I head inside. Hey Haruka.
Hi, Kakaru.
As I turn around to look at her properly, I see that she's already been practicing while waiting for me to arrive, her sheet music flipped to a page somewhere in the middle of the piece. Mentally noting her now usual eagerness, gladly, I cross the room to sit at the piano. It doesn't take long for us to get started, making a few attempts at the piece, and as I had hoped, I gradually become less on edge. The practice we'd had last Friday had helped to solidify our new arrangement fully, leading to a more smooth experience, and today only seems to be building on it, the two of us steadily growing better as a duo. The thought gives me a little boost as we bring another relatively successful run-through to a halt. As the final notes ring out, I look at Haruka expectantly, anticipating some positive feedback, but she stays quiet, reading back over her sheet music. That was much better, don't you think? She glances up briefly, seeming somewhat distracted.
Yeah, it was in general, but I'm just thinking about the dynamics in my part towards the end. Do you think I bring enough intensity, or have I been too quiet?
I cast my mind over the section that she means, analyzing her performance. It sounded good to me, but if you want to try it again with some changes, we can. She nods thoughtfully in response, seeming to want to take me up on the offer.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind.
Okay. We go again, Haruka audibly trying to inject more emotion into her playing, creating greater contrast between the parts that change in volume. When we come to a stop once more, I'm quick to compliment her on the improvement that she's made. I liked that. It sounded more expressive, like you said. Instead of agreeing with me, she creases her brow, chewing on her bottom lip pensively.
Are you sure? I don't want to be dragging that section down. It leads up to the most dramatic part of the piece, and it'd be awful if it didn't set the scene properly.
I understand her concern, but to be honest, I genuinely thought that she'd played very well just now. Yeah, it seemed right to me, but we can have another go if you want. She ponders over it for a moment before seeming set on the idea.
All right. Sorry, I just want to make sure it sounds as good as it can.
It's all right. I can't really question how thorough she's being, considering that the piece really does hang a lot of importance on emotional intensity. Never mind the fact that she loves it so much that she'll want to give the best performance of it possible. We run it once more, and as I monitor her playing as we begin the section in question, I feel more confident that she's going to feel better about it in time. This time. She's doing a great job of bringing the light and dark of the piece to life. However, as I turn the page of my sheet music and continue playing, she totally startles me by blowing into the flute too hard, causing it to chirp shrilly, and emitting a frustrated groan a second later. The noise is so unexpected that I immediately lose any semblance of where I am at in the piece. Though I momentarily feel guilty for messing up, I realize that she's stopped playing entirely, so I do the same, the notes hanging in the air awkwardly, unfinished.
No, that's not good either.
She huffs loudly in irritation, and I almost flinch a little at the sound. She doesn't usually get this flustered during our practices, so the sudden change of pace is quite off-putting for me. I thought that was the best one until you stopped. She shakes her head resolutely against my praise.
No, it was all... I don't know, but it's not right.
It's not me, is it? I asked due to the fact that I've never seen her struggle with anything this much, figuring that it could very easily be something I'm doing wrong that's throwing her off.
No, you're fine. I like how you're playing. It's this bit here.
She jabs a finger into her sheet music, tracing it along a set of bars.
I feel like I'm not articulating it well enough.
I really don't see an issue with her playing, but I don't want her to be unsatisfied with it. However, I am starting to feel a little uncomfortable with this situation. I guess I've just been relying on her sense of balance and optimism to bolster me as usual, but unfortunately the opposite seems to be happening all of a sudden. The more unsure she becomes, the more my nerves start to creep back into me. It makes me feel as though we're not prepared enough, even though on Friday we'd felt more confident in our performance than we had before. It's starting to seem like we're backtracking somehow.
Can I just go through it by myself for a moment and then join in with you again?
Sure. She sets about looping parts of the section in question over and over, altering her playing style each time. Though I hear promising things in each variation, she still doesn't seem happy, her eyebrows permanently flattened in chagrin as she works. I sit there awkwardly in silence, waiting for her to figure out what seems right to her. But after a while, she stops playing again, appearing no more reassured than before.
I don't know what sounds good anymore. What do you think?
For a moment, I'm almost too shy to speak up, not wanting to give her a reply that she's not convinced about. But at the same time, I can't help but share my feelings. To be honest, it feels like you're getting too hung up on it. You sounded good the first few times. As she takes in my words, she looks up at me, having been preoccupied with her sheet music, her expression growing apologetic, as though she's just realized how she's been acting.
I'm sorry, Kakaru. I don't mean to be finicky. This can't be fun for you.
It's okay. I don't want her to feel bad, I just want the piece to sound right for her, and it's not enjoyable to work on it when she's clearly unsure about it. Plus, I feel as though some of the drive she'd had up until now is missing, although she might just be having an off day.
You might be right. Maybe I'm overthinking it. Okay, let's ignore that for now and just focus on the other stuff. I'll come back to that part later.
Sure. Taking a collective breath, we try to clear our heads and keep working. After a few more run-throughs, during which she doesn't fixate on the troublesome section, things start to feel a little easier, which I'm incredibly glad about. There's still a tinge of dissatisfaction in the air on her part, but we seem to be moving past it somewhat, for now. Trying to fully regain my concentration, I play seriously, hoping that we can just write this off as a temporary glitch. Glancing across at my calendar as I finish getting ready, I note that it's Tuesday. Sometimes the school days seem to bleed into one, and I forget where we are in the week. Contemplating the day ahead of me, I find myself looking forward to what I hope will be a better practice with Haruka. Yesterday had been quite unnerving in a way, and her qualms with her playing has made me feel pretty off balance. Hopefully, her worries will have passed and she'll be a little more relaxed in today's practice. Heading quietly back down the stairs, I pop into the kitchen momentarily to place my bowl from breakfast into the sink. Time to leave for school. I'm just about to open my mouth to say goodbye to Mom, wherever she may be, when she appears in the doorway as though my intentions had summoned her. I can't help but notice that she's wearing a strange expression that I can't describe, but which contains both excitement and concern.
I know you're about to head off, Kakaru, but I've just had a call with the school.
Why do I not like the sound of this? I feel like anytime my parents and teachers talk to each other, a nightmare ensues. However, there's something about her demeanor that seems to suggest that it's a little different this time.
They just told me that families of students performing in the end-of-year festival next week are given priority access to ticket sales, and asked if I wanted to book any.
Oh, crap. He didn't tell his mom he was doing this. I've been so wrapped up in throwing myself into practice and trying to keep a level head about the performance that I'd totally forgotten about it, if and when I was going to tell my parents about it. Her expression is full of questions, and I squirm somewhat guiltily under her gaze, feeling bad for having not told her and Dad myself.
Are you doing something at the festival, Kakaru?
Her voice is strongly flecked with disbelief, as though she thinks that the school's got it wrong. But there's also a hint of optimism in there too, in a sort of too good to be true way. It takes me a moment to reply out of nerves. Yeah, well, I'm trying to. Technically, that's the most honest answer I can give. I'm not any more sure than she is about whether Haruka and I will actually manage to make it to stage or not, but we're aiming to, and that's the only thing that I can claim with certainty. She almost doesn't know how to react, and in a way, I don't blame her.
Is this with the music club?
I nod. Haruka and I are playing a duet. She seems to take a moment to process what I've said, and then her face lights up in a shocked smile.
That's wonderful, Kakaru! I'm so pleased that you've been working towards something. It's so sweet that the two of you are teaming up too.
I appreciate her words, but the fact that I'm still terrified of the performance kinda mutes the pleasant feeling. I specifically didn't tell her and Dad about this because I didn't want them to get their hopes up, only for me to let them down in the end. I don't know if I'll manage it. It sounds awfully pathetic as I say it, but I guess I need to put it out there. A crappy disclaimer to warn her that it might not actually happen. Mom's smile fades somewhat and she seems to contemplate something. I feel as though I'm about to get chided for being pessimistic, but then she grows somewhat gentle in the way she looks at me.
Honestly, Kakaru, the fact that you're even trying in the first place is fantastic. I never thought I'd hear you say that you're working towards a performance. This is so promising for you.
Her voice grows a little higher with excitement, and I wince at just how much I know she must want for me to go through with the concert.
I think you're taking great steps by just aiming to participate, and I'm sure that working with Haruka will give you an extra confidence boost, won't it?
In a way, yes, but it also doesn't change the fact that I'm still totally freaking out about it.
If you don't perform, then it's not the end of the world. If you do manage it, though, is it alright for your father and I to buy tickets to come and see you? There's nothing that would make us prouder.
This whole conversation is sending shockwaves through me. But I have to concede that if I really am going to give a performance, then there's no doubt that I'd want my parents to see it. If it's going to redeem me as a functional person in their eyes, then they can have at it. Yeah, that's okay. She brightens again, seeming to be attempting to cool the giddiness that's bubbling under the surface.
Great! I'll buy 2 tickets today.
I nod in response, and she straightens up as if she's about to leave the room. I'm not entirely sure how I feel about the fact that my parents are now set on attending the festival. It puts an extra pressure on me that I've been trying to avoid. Mom hovers in the doorway, eyeing me with concern, and I realize that she's probably read the emotions on my face. Despite the fact that we've been kinda estranged for a long time, she still knows me pretty well, I guess.
Kakeru, I know you aren't always confident about this, but I want you to know that your father and I will always be proud of you, no matter what happens. You've already done so many brilliant things in the past couple of months. You made a friend, you've joined a club. You're doing a good job. The most important thing is that you're enjoying yourself. We've noticed that you seem a little happier nowadays, and if that's the club's influence, then that's wonderful. If you'd like to give performing a shot, just trust yourself and go for it, Kakeru.
I hadn't expected this sudden pep talk, and I don't know what to say in response. I linger awkwardly in the middle of the room, running her words through my mind and trying to get my thoughts in order. Before I can reply, she continues.
I just know you can do it if you put your mind to it. But if you're not ready, that's okay too.
It's pretty considerate of her to say this. To be willing to accept me, even if I let her down, is something I really appreciate, and I feel as though I don't deserve. I nod, but recalling my recent attempts to try and be more open with my parents, I pull my gaze upward to look in her eyes properly for a moment. Thanks, Mom. She beams contentedly at me, as though thanking me for my respect without words.
No problem, Kakeru. Anyway, hadn't you better get going?
Oh yeah, right.
Have a good day.
She disappears, heading upstairs, and my breath rushes out of me, though I hadn't realized I'd been holding it. I can't help but feel more nervous about the performance now, but there had also been something comforting about what Mom had said. I just know you can do it if you put your mind to it. In a way, that's what I've been hanging my hopes on for the past few weeks. The idea that if I just keep working and putting my head down into the practices, that I'd feel able to ignore the real reason that I'm scared. Just reminding myself of the mental image of stage lights on my hemangioma makes me shudder. I can't let myself think about that now. It'll throw off all my progress. However, I guess what Mom had said had been in reference to that too, as well as just the general nerves that come with performing. And to be honest, that might have even been the entirety of what she meant. I just know you can ignore your fears about your hemangioma if you put your mind to it. Perhaps that had been the real meaning behind it. If that's the case, well, I sincerely hope she's right. Pulling myself back into the moment, I make for the door, but before I can get very far, my phone jingles for attention. Hey, would you like to meet up for lunch today? I exhale a little laugh. We have lunch together almost every day now, but it never gets old. Sure, your spot or mine. Almost time. The morning's classes had been just as nondescript as always, and now lunchtime is upon us. God, do I feel pathetic hiding out in the boys' bathroom like this. The fact that I can't walk through a crowded corridor doesn't exactly bode well for me performing on stage, but I don't want to think about that right now. Keeping an eye on the time as I scroll through my phone, I stand up when it hits the minute I'm waiting for. Flushing the toilet despite the fact I never actually used it, just to keep up appearances, I exit the stall, wash my hands, and head out. I don't face too much student traffic as I climb the stairs, as most people have got to wherever they're going by now. Hopping up to Haruka's floor, I wonder how closely I managed to time our meeting. I almost laugh when I see how accurate I am. As soon as I reach the top of the stairs, stepping to the side into the corridor to wait, I spot her heading towards me around 15 feet away. All these weeks of gauging how slowly she leaves her classroom have paid off. Hi, Haruka. She turns towards my voice, visibly appreciating my signal.
Hi, Kakaru. Are you ready to go?
Yeah. His spot. I'd let Haruka choose our lunch spot this morning, and she'd asked to eat at my regular bench. We open our lunch boxes and start eating amid another one of our comfortable silences. Haruka seems to go off into something of a daydream, and I absent-mindedly watch a group of boys kick a football around on the field closest to the main school building. A few minutes go by and Haruka remains quiet, despite the fact that we're often content to relax without speaking to each other constantly. She's usually broken the silence by now. Without having to attempt to conceal it, I glance at her curiously. She looks pensive as she eats, in a way that suggests to me that there might be something on her mind, and her mildly troubled expression reminds me a little of how unsatisfied she'd been yesterday. Hoping to either find out what's bothering her or maybe distract her from it, I awkwardly speak up. How are you feeling about our progress then? Do you think we're doing okay? In response to my question, she lowers her chopsticks and turns her head slightly, her expression shifting between several things one after another.
Yeah, we're probably fine.
I feel as though she's being somewhat evasive, and while I don't want to probe, I also don't like the idea that she's concealing something that she's worried about. Are you okay, Haruka? She freezes for a moment, and I can almost see her mind working, planning to divert the conversation, but then she seems to change her mind.
My parents got the phone call this morning telling them that the priority ticket sales for the festival were open.
I guess everyone who's in any of the participating clubs will have had a call home. Mine did too. She nods slowly, but doesn't continue, seeming wrapped up in her thoughts.
My mom talked to me about it before I came to school.
My mom? This is Kakaru speaking. Wow. My mom talked to me about it before I came to school. It wasn't so bad, but it kind of made me extra nervous too, in a way. She nods again, but much more vigorously, seeming to empathize.
My parents have been mentioning it since just after we went to the concert. They're really nice about it, but we've done this for years now, and I'm pretty sure they've already accepted the idea I'm not going to do it.
Damn, that's rough. Haruka hasn't even given up yet, but her parents must be bracing themselves for disappointment in advance. It makes sense given what's happened in the past, but it can't feel good for Haruka to know that they're essentially expecting nothing from her every time. Are they going to buy tickets? Mine are getting theirs today. Knowing how excited Mom had been, she'd probably called the school back and booked them before I'd even made it halfway here. Haruka fiddles with her chopsticks, looking disheartened.
I'm not sure. They don't usually.
Poor Haruka. She turns back to her meal as if to attempt to distract herself from her worries, and I'm left unsure of what to say. I want to cheer her up, but this isn't the kind of situation that you could just brush under the carpet and dismiss easily with a single comment or joke. Not when it has so much to do with the goal she's been repeatedly working towards for years. To my shame, I also grow quiet, trying to think of anything that might make her feel better, but coming up pretty short. I wish I was better with words. After a minute or so, during which we both simply sit and eat our food, I realize that the only thing I can really offer is the reminder that she's not alone this time. I'm doing this with her now, and despite the fact that it probably doesn't provide much comfort, I am still here. Clearing my throat awkwardly, I pipe up. I know it might not mean much, but, well, at least we're doing this together now, right? She looks up from her lunch, waiting for me to embellish. I'm not exactly a musical genius, but I still want to play with you. I'm scared about this too, but if we've got each other, then I feel like I'm not getting any of this right at all. However, Haruka begins to nod slightly, apparently finding some merit in what I just said.
I know what you mean. And don't talk down about your abilities. I'm glad you've agreed to perform with me. Really, I am.
That surprises me, but I accept it anyway. I guess I can't be that bad if she's happy to work with me. She goes back to her food once more, and though the air feels slightly lighter, I'm not entirely sure that I've been able to help much. However, she doesn't bring up the festival again, so she must be content to put her concerns aside for now. Wednesday. It is Wednesday, my dudes. I've just arrived at Haruka's floor, ready to go to lunch with her again. Our practices are something I appreciate, but I like our quiet lunches too. They're pretty much the only time we spend together that doesn't revolve around working. Not that I dislike the effort we've been putting into Venus, of course, but I'm still not exactly feeling confident about things. Haruka had been somewhat more relaxed in yesterday's practice, but still not quite her usual self, so my own energy had been a little low to reflect hers. As I watch her approaching from down the hallway, I find myself praying that her view of our performance will continue to improve. Hey, Haruka.
Hey, Kakeru. Ready for lunch?
Yep, lead the way. We're heading to Haruka's spot today. The summer heat has really begun to blaze, and neither of us want to suffer in the humidity outside when we could stay indoors and enjoy the blessing of the aircon. Air conditioning, God's gift to man. As we head down the corridor that takes us past Haruka's classroom, she looks towards me vaguely as we walk.
We can work on it later, but I was practicing that section I've been struggling with last night, and I think I've got a better idea of what to do. I've tried a few things out, so I'll show you during the club practice.
Sounds good. Her words are like music to my ears in the wake of such frustration on her part.
Okay, since I'm playing much higher notes than you at the start of that part, I think...
She stops herself for a moment, her eyes fixed ahead of us in concern, and the same thing catches my attention. A distant echo rises up into the air, sounding like two people teasing each other loudly, and several other students walking by turning their heads momentarily in curiosity. That's my best character voice. You mean Haruka? However, since the perpetrators are out of sight, everyone simply goes back to their conversations, losing interest. Haruka seems to sense the same thing, relaxing once more as the ruckus dies down, and continues with her ideas.
What was I saying? Oh right, the high notes. I think it'd be better if you're a little louder during those parts, as I'll already be cutting through pretty noticeably. But then as I come down, you can soften up slightly. Although, when we get to the last bit...
I still have half an ear on her, but my concentration is broken slightly by more noise. She seems content to ignore it, talking over it, but it's what she can't see that worries me. Two boys have emerged from another corridor, evidently the ones behind the shouting just a moment ago, play fighting energetically and giggling. After wiggling free of the other's grasp, one of them takes off down the hallway at half speed, and the first boy gives chase. I watch them as they run in our direction, moving closer to the wall in anticipation of them zooming past us. However, the closer they get, the more uncomfortable I feel. The boy in the lead casts back over his shoulder to see how he's going to freaking hit this blind girl, isn't he? Don't do this to me! Don't do this to her! The boy in the lead casts back over his shoulder to see how far behind his friend is, and the two begin yelling at each other again, between barks of laughter when they make eye contact. All the while, they continue to barrel down the corridor with considerable speed, too fast for a narrow place like this. I take a look at Haruka, who's still chatting by my side, feeling guilty for having missed half of what she said. She seems happy to act as though the boys aren't there, but in contrast, I'm starting to get a little anxious. I don't know why, but it feels like it happens. My bad feeling comes to fruition. Completely unaware of what's in front of him, the boy in the lead shoots a sarcastic joke, still looking back at his friend, and drifts towards our side of the hallway, straying gradually from his original course. I turn to Haruka, beginning to reach out, but it all happens so fast that my hand has only just left my side when disaster strikes. I'm rattled so severely by the proximity of the boys who had streaked towards us with such momentum that I flinch wildly, darting across the corridor to escape them on impulse. After holding my breath for a few seconds and trembling in fear, I realize that I'm okay. However, when I turn back to survey the scene, a hole opens up in my stomach when I realize that Haruka is not. My chest starts to clench unpleasantly as I see that she's no longer by my side and instead is sprawled out on the floor a few feet away from me, crumpled in an awkward position, the corridor littered with her belongings. One of the boys must have run straight into her, knocking her completely off her feet, and as a result, every single person in the place is now staring, open-mouthed, at the two of us. The boys, however, don't seem to bat an eye and continue to race towards the stairs at full speed. "Somebody get a number on that truck!" I instantly become frozen, terrified by all of this unwanted attention. Though I desperately want to make sure that Haruka is alright, the cacophony of so many simultaneous feelings inside my head overwhelms me, and my limbs refuse to move. As if I'm spectating from outside the situation, I watch stiffly as many people spring into action at once. Several rush into Haruka's side, while someone else begins to reprimand the boys, yelling after them. "Are you seriously going to run away without saying sorry? Don't be such a dick! She's disabled, for God's sake!" "Oh my God, I can't believe that just happened! Someone do something! She might be hurt! I'm telling the teacher!" My head begins to spin horribly as I remain trapped in place, and up ahead, Haruka is now surrounded by a group of girls. Most of them are trying to help her sit up, fussing over her and checking her for wounds, while another retrieves her flute case from the ground and brings it over to her. I'm momentarily touched by how caring they're all being, but as I catch a glimpse of Haruka's face amid them all, I realize that this still isn't a good situation. Despite their kindness, her expression is bewildered and highly anxious, fearful of having so much attention on her. She manages to take her flute case from the girl who'd given it back to her, but her ability to cope with the situation rapidly begins to deteriorate. This is the most petrified I've ever seen her, and I feel as though if I were her right now, I'd be seconds away from a panic attack. I'm hating everything about this myself, but gritting my teeth, I realize that I can't just stand here like a wimp and watch her suffer. Shaking myself loose of my self-imposed stasis with difficulty, I lumber clumsily down the corridor, spying her cane on the ground to my left. I lunge for it, and then approach the cluster of girls who are patting her down and trying to ask her questions, though she's not responding. I take a second to frantically figure out what to do, scared of being so close to so many people. In the dire hope of ending this whole thing as quickly as possible, I steel myself and squeeze between two of the girls awkwardly, reaching for Haruka's arm. She almost doesn't notice as I take hold of it, casting around herself in literal blind terror and beginning to hyperventilate. Distressed on her behalf as well as my own, I press the handle of her cane into the palm of her hand and she distractedly grips it. I want to pull her to her feet, but I feel as though it might tip her over the edge, so I force my voice out of my throat in a pathetic strangled whine. "Here." She jumps as she recognizes my voice, looking in my direction with pleading eyes, and starts to lean towards me. I take this as a confirmation that it's all right to help her and grasp her other arm in support as she rises from the ground shakily like a newly born foal trying to stand up for the first time. At the sight of this, the gaggle of girls around us seem to get the idea that Haruka is very uncomfortable. They step back slightly to give her more space, though remain firmly circled around us, their brows crinkled in concern.
Does she need to go to the nurse's office? I'm going to report those boys. Is she okay?
Both Haruka and I reel from the discomfort of being the center of attention, and though I appreciate everybody's concern, I think we really need to get out of here. I can't tell if Haruka's been injured by the collision or not, but either way, she's only going to calm down once we're alone again. Feeling stiff, I turn and do my best to look at them all apologetically, hoping that my eyes convey more gratitude than my single word does.
Thanks.
They seem conflicted, as though they don't want to let her go without ensuring that she's okay, but a couple of them nod and back away, seeming to get the message. As the others look on worriedly, I alter my grip on Haruka in order to steer her away from the scene. I start to walk tentatively, and though her eyes are still wide with shock, she complies, pattering unsteadily alongside me. Urgently wanting to get her somewhere quiet to avoid her having a total meltdown, I cast around wildly, looking for a decent spot. After a moment, I notice a gap between two sets of lockers standing against the wall around a corner. Realizing that there's probably not anywhere else better than this in the direction we're heading, I make my way towards it, partially dragging Haruka as I go. It takes me a moment to shepherd her into the gap, hindered by the fact that she's probably unsure of where we are. But once we're in place, we gain some slight cover from the main corridor, a small reprieve from the chaos. The most important thing is that we're alone once more. Trying to uncoil some of my tension now that the worst is over, I look at Haruka still holding her arms. Her whole body is trembling, almost transferring through our contact and making me do the same, and her breath comes in sharp gasps. They're gone now. Nobody's here. I mumble the words out to her stutteringly, wanting her to know that the source of her fear is no longer there. And I see what seems to be a hint of a nod coming from her, though her alarm doesn't die down. Her lips move with futility, unable to summon anything I can understand. And then before I can react, she lurches forward. I struggle to comprehend what's happening for a second, but then I feel Haruka's weight against me, her grip around my torso.
She needed this.
She's earned this. She's hugging me. I'm momentarily dumbstruck, and for a few long seconds, my nerves spike horribly at the fact that I'm being touched so unavoidably. The two of us had never made this much physical contact before, but as she quivers against me, still totally overwhelmed, I feel a rush of compassion for her mixed in with my awkward sense of shock. I guess her mental trauma is such that she just needs someone to hold her. Feeling incredibly odd, as though my body isn't my own, I give in to her need for comfort and slowly wrap my arms around her, feeling wooden with uncertainty. This is so weird. I can't remember the last time I did anything like this with anyone. It feels very strange, especially considering that her face is pressed against my chin, dangerously close to my hemangioma. Not wanting it to become apparent, I shift slightly until she's resting against my other side. Other than going with my movement, she doesn't react, maintaining her somewhat tight hold on me as she continues to babble quietly, trying to speak. Sensing just how shaken she really is from the incident, my sympathy starts to take over my awkwardness in a greater way, and I try to relax into the embrace and just let her wind down. As the wordless seconds tick by, I slowly start to feel somewhat more comfortable with this new proximity, though a part of me is still reeling from having someone literally attached to me. I'm not sure how long we stand there for, but eventually she manages to say something.
Sorry.
She sounds somewhat regretful for forcing this sudden closeness upon me, but nevertheless, she doesn't move away. Her voice is full of emotion, though I can't quite tell if she's crying or not. Don't be. I remain in place, allowing her to stay in my arms until she's more steady. Seeming grateful for it, she buries her face into my collar, exhaling with a timid, distressed sound, as though trying to get all of her lingering fear out of her. When she speaks again, she seems a little less uptight, though her voice still sounds somewhat strained.
What happened? I heard someone shouting and running.
Oh God, of course. She probably wasn't able to understand what exactly had been going on as she'd been hit. No wonder she's been so incredibly terrified. 2 boys were messing around and chasing each other. One of them knocked you over and then they ran away. Now that I'm recounting it out loud, the full extent of just how ignorant and rude it truly had been strikes me. Sure, people fool around, granted, but to literally slam someone into the ground, and a disabled person at that, and not even apologize, is just despicable. Bitterly, I hope that whichever one of those girls claim to be reporting them actually does, that they get some sort of punishment for it. They might not have known Haruka and clearly didn't even notice her at first, but their actions had been completely disrespectful. Tearing my mind away from my annoyance, I put my focus back on Haruka, and she replies quietly.
I thought it was something like that. It all happened so fast.
A deep pity for her growing in my chest, I nod, the soft texture of her hair brushing against my face. Are you hurt? She'd gone down with a mighty blow. When I'd helped her pick herself up, I'd been surprised not to see bloody knees, or at least some scrapes.
Not really. My shoulder hurts where he bumped into it. And I think I hit it again when I fell, but I don't think it's that bad.
I sincerely hope that she's not talking down her pain to keep up appearances, although I decide to trust her for now. I'll keep an eye on her during our club session later and make sure that she's not still obviously hurting. She squirms against me for a second, still locked in the hug, and then pipes up again, some anguish in her voice.
I feel so bad about those girls. They were only trying to help me, but I was so scared I didn't even say thanks.
I can understand her turmoil, though she can't exactly be blamed for being so stunned and petrified by everything that she couldn't speak to them. I said thanks for both of us. I'd barely been able to get the word out, but if it'll make Haruka feel a little better for not having said it herself, then I'll stick by it anyway.
I guess so. Thanks for doing that. And,
She takes a moment to collect herself, shifting a little, and then grasps the material of my blazer on my back.
And for helping me get out of there. And, for this.
I'm not used to having conversations with her while we're pressed against each other, but I still feel glad that whatever she's getting from this is positive. I guess this is just another unexpected thing about our relationship that I've come to realize I can handle, albeit awkwardly. Another one of my I never thought I'd be able to do this moments. It's okay. She takes a deep breath and then at last loosens her grip around me. I do the same, searching her face as we part. To my surprise, I can't see any tear tracks, and she seems to have calmed down considerably, although I get the feeling that she might be putting on something of a brave face. There's a somewhat bashful silence between us, the atmosphere a little strange as we attempt to go back to normal after having been essentially stuck together. After a few seconds, she straightens up and looks towards me with a partially veiled discomfort.
Anyway, shall we eat then?
I almost want to push the issue, not wanting her to hold in whatever's bothering her, whether it's something to do with me or the girls or her potential injuries. However, after considering it for a moment, I realize that she probably just wants to get on with our day and let the unpleasant incident pass with time. Relenting to her wishes, I bite my tongue. Sure. And that's a good safe spot. I hope those boys get detention. You don't shove a blind girl to the ground and get away with it. So I hope that they get in so much trouble. Wow, what an eventful day, huh? So that was Venus Improbable Dream. And I'll be back next Sunday to continue playing it. That should be fun. Do I know what I'm playing this week yet? I do not. But it should be fun, whatever it is. So, thanks, Dorian, for being here very much. Shout out to the lurkers, and shout out to all the people who watch this series on YouTube after the fact. I'll be back next Sunday with this game. I'll be back on Tuesday with something else. Until then, on behalf of East Asia Soft, I have been Skull. Have yourselves a great day and a great week, and I will see you all next time. Bye-bye.